This is from the Frontlines, Jay Wilcox, at the United States Environmental Protection Agency's Science Advisory Board's public meeting on groundwater contamination from hydraulic fracturing. The gas industry's executives testified unanimously that there is no connection between fracking and water contamination. Investigative Reporter Melissa Troutman disputes Big Oil's claims and is calling for a full federal investigation of the EPA for colluding with the gas industry.
I'm here to request a federal investigation of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, for ignoring evidence that clearly shows contamination of drinking water related to the development of shale oil and gas that has impacted residents in Pennsylvania for years, subjecting them to illness and disease through exposure to toxins through their drinking water.
Haliburton appreciates the work of the Hydraulic Fracturing Research Advisory Panel and the time and effort put in by the panel members. We agree with a number of the conclusions and recommendations set forth in the panel's report concerning EPA's draft assessment of the potential impacts of hydraulic fracturing on drinking water. At the same time, we have a number of significant concerns regarding the panel's report.
At first, DEP would not give us this information. They claimed it was confidential, but with enough bulldogging and hiring attorneys, we eventually got the files. We are still collecting them. These data maps that we have published at publicfiles.org show where water pollution clusters have occurred, cases that specific officials at DEP have knowingly kept hidden.
Our first concern is that the panel continues to criticize the EPA's conclusion that it did not find evidence that the mechanisms for potential impact from HF have led to, quote, widespread systemic impacts to drinking water resources, end quote.
If EPA had reviewed the 2,309 cases obtained by our newsroom and released in September 2015, we'd be sitting here discussing how best to place the field workers, administrative staff, and supervisors of DEP who knowingly put the public in harm's way by neglecting their duties and using politics instead of science to make decisions. The data in these complaint records clearly shows a trail and pattern of impacts to drinking water, but also a pattern of regulatory indifference, neglect, partiality, and bias to the industry. These records, when analyzed with the intent to protect the public health and environment, prove that DEP has acted criminally.
Numerous studies, which we have cited in prior comments, have concluded that there is no evidence of measurable impacts of hydraulic fracturing on drinking water resources on a regional basis. While a number of the studies cited by the panel purport to reach a different conclusion, those studies should be viewed with caution for the reasons we have identified in our prior comments to the panel, while others need to be re-reviewed to avoid mischaracterization of the findings.
The DEP allowed drinking water supplies to be contaminated with permits from their office, then when made aware of that contamination, allowed the pollution, poisons, and toxic water to be kept off the books, is no less criminal than the acts perpetuated by officials now facing criminal charges for the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. For 8 years, DEP has knowingly suppressed, withheld, and covered up hundreds of water contamination cases in Pennsylvania that we know of. In this room sit industry officials who've happily sat back to watch families sign non-disclosure agreement after non-disclosure agreement while DEP shrouds the public from this data. The only place you can get these water contamination cases, as an aggregate by the way, is publicfiles.org.
Finally, we believe that there is no need for EPA to address the investigations of Dimock, Parker County, and Pavilion in its assessment. There is good reason to conclude that the drinking water issues in these three areas are not related to HF activities. For example, in Parker County, there have been no allegations that the stimulation of nearby oil and gas wells played any role in the observed methane levels in the wells of area residents. Including these three cases in the assessment would do nothing to contribute to an understanding of the impacts of HF operations on drinking water resources. EPA can respond to questions from members of the public regarding the status of these investigations independently of the assessment.
These companies are afforded some of the best economic protections in America, where they are allowed to contaminate aquifer after aquifer and still be granted new permits only months after these violations. And this doesn't mean EPA is off the hook. Just as in Flint, both state and federal agencies are waiting in rivers of evidence without acting on it. How many Dimock cases does the EPA think there are in 2,309 water contamination complaints? And how many does there need to be for EPA to act in a manner where they declare the state regulatory agency incapable capable of performing its duties. How many cases need to be in these records for the federal government to open a criminal investigation of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection? Thank you.
Who do you believe? The investigative reporter or the gas corporations? This is Jay Wilcox. Thanks for watching from the front lines.